when I woke up, very confused. She said, "You almost died last night. In fact, no one can believe you were alive."
I went into the games not knowing what was coming.
As humans, we just hate uncertainty.
You just sensed that it was out there.
You have to start somewhere.
We're all programmed to push ourselves even farther.
This is On the X, an IRONCLAD original. Welcome to On the X. My guest today is Brian Gottlieb, author of Beyond the Hammer, a fresh approach to leadership, culture, and building high-performance teams. In 2009, Brian started a home services business with just $3,000, growing it into a powerhouse operation across multiple states, employing over 600 people and generating nearly $1 billion in lifetime sales. Beyond his business success, Brian is an angel investor, board member, and sought-after keynote speaker. He's also the founder of Baths for the Brave, a national program providing safer showers for veterans with mobility challenges. A graduate of Harvard Business School's executive education program, Brian is passionate about building exceptional teams and driving meaningful impact. So here we go with Brian Gottlieb on the X. Just kind of reading up on you, reading your book, and kind of learning some stuff about it. I think the first thing that jumped out to me was you sort of talk about traditional education didn't work for you in some capacity. What's that mean exactly? Like, how didn't it work?
So I guess it was, today we would call it ADD. I think back in the 70s, we didn't know what it was. I couldn't do a test. I couldn't sit still in class and all that sort of thing. It wasn't really designed for people like me. And in fact, taking tests were stressful. So I barely graduated high school, but I found my passion truly in dealing with people. And that naturally took me to having a business.
Okay. Did you go to college, or did you not go to college?
I eventually went to Harvard Business School when I was 52 years old.
Oh, when you're 52. Okay. But you went right from high school to business, essentially?
Right into selling pots and pans door to door, and then all sorts of other interesting sales jobs. Yeah.
And was that a conscious choice for you? Was it like, hey, the school thing just doesn't work for me and I'm really interested in business? Or was it something else, I guess?
Well, for sure, the school thing didn't work for me, so I needed to make money. But what I found is that, and we're talking back in 1978, that when I graduated high school, some of my friends were in college and they were getting jobs, and I'm making killings selling pots and pans door to door. And back then, I was doing quite well, and I realized, and it's even true today that there's a great path for people that don't want to go to college. If you get into sales or get into the trades or those sorts of things, I mean, it can be transformational.
Yeah, no, for sure. What made you want to, sell pots and pans door to door though? By the way, I think that's such a unique skill set, like the ability to do that, to one, just be a good salesperson. And I'd love to get your cut on this because I've worked at companies where I ran a sales team and I have my own kind of take on salespeople, like natural salespeople in general. I feel like it's like a talent. Basically, like people are just there. If you are good at sales, I'm not sure it's something you can teach people. It's just, that's kind of the way they're programmed. What do you think on that?
Well, I think it's a combination, right? I think you can have somebody that is naturally good at sales, but with a process, they can become even better.
Sure.
And look, I think if people are somewhat competitive, that's a good thing if you're a salesperson, right?
Yeah.
If you like to win, and in fact, in my businesses, I had over 100 sales reps that worked for me. They were all straight commission, and some of them were tigers, and not many of them went to college.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that, and yet they make a tremendous amount of money, which is they deserve to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, I had this argument, or not argument, but I had this discussion a lot again when I kind of ran a sales team with the CEO of the company, and like how you figure out how to compensate people appropriately to get the right incentive, to get them to sell and all of that. Like, do you give them a base? Do you give them commission? Obviously, how much commission? All of that. Right. That's interesting. So you did 100% commission with it sales team. 100%
commission. We paid a small training salary in the beginning, but after that, they were straight commission. It was really hunt and kill for your next meal.
Yeah.
And it was in the home improvement space.
Yeah.
So it was my job, our business's role, to furnish appointments for the sales reps, and they had to go out and close. and that was their
Yeah.
that was their job.
And I think to your point about the Tigers, the real salespeople love that. They love that sort of competitive, I'm going to be the best salesperson, I'm going to get the most commission, that kind of thing, right?
You can usually tell a great salesperson when you have a leaderboard up on the wall, and
Sure.
they're putting in their numbers and how they feel if they're not in first place. It's kind of cool.
So is that you? Are you one of those people?
I am highly competitive. Yeah.
Did you know that early on though? Were you somebody who were like, I like sales, I realize I like sales, and that's why I'm doing this?
So it's interesting. Early on, I knew I liked to be creative. Okay. But I couldn't sing, and I wasn't any good at playing instruments, and I couldn't draw. And I learned that you can be creative with people. And once that started to click for me, that I could be creative selling, and I can have great conversations with people, and I can get them to tell me things. And I learned how to use my creativity that way. And of course, I love to win. So those two things coupled together comes up with a good
That's
result.
interesting, because I would almost describe myself in the same way, but I hate sales. I'm such not, I found this out about myself after the military. And I think a lot of, this kind of goes out to the veterans out there. I think a lot of people that are in the military, when you get into the business world, business leaders sort of assume that you're going to be a salesy type person, like you're a go-getter and you're competitive, all of those things. And that's totally true with me. And I found myself in this sales role. And after a while, I was like, I hate this. I don't like cold calling people. I don't like trying to convince people to buy something. It's very awkward for me. But I'm a creative guy. I like the marketing aspect of things, which is what I do now. Like I like that part where I'm like, I don't have to directly sell anything. I have to sort of convince you abstractly, right?
You sell a concept, right? You have to sell a concept. You have to, you're trying to bring in a new audience. You're doing all those things. I think marketing and selling is very, very close.
Of course they are. Yeah. But I just think it's that direct interaction where it's the difference for me is I don't have to like talk face to face or on the call, whatever it is, and be like, try to convince you to buy something you may not even have known that you want, or maybe you don't even need, but I'm trying to tell you, yes, you do need it. Whereas
like new pots and pans,
like new pots and pans. Right. And especially that, like going door to door, I can't even imagine. Like if someone asked me to do that, I would be like, no way am I going to door to door. Cause like 90% of the people must just like slam the door in your face, right? They don't want to talk to you.
I suppose now that's even more than that, right? But back in the 70s, you got a nice 18-year-old kid knocking on your door. You're in New York. You're probably going to talk to them.
That's probably true. It's probably different these days. Yeah.
I think it's gotten harder.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I try to be as nice as I can to the people that come to my door, especially like doing political stuff, but I'm basically like, hey, I don't want to talk to you. Like just leave the stuff,
I like
whatever.
hearing their pitch when canvassers knock at my door. I kind of want to hear what they have to say. And that was, by the way, in my business, we had 600 employees.
Yeah.
But one of the ways we would groom salespeople was through door knocking. We had a huge canvassing team that would wander around neighborhoods, knocking on doors, trying to schedule appointments for home improvement projects. And the people that were really good at that, obviously their next step up was to get into sales.
Yeah.
So it was
So talk about that. Talk about going from selling pots and pans to you had this super successful business, which I'm not even sure exactly what it is, home services, but I don't even know exactly what that means. So how did you transition, and like what was that growth like?
Pots and pans was a good run, but then I found that I started working for this company that was selling weather stripping and window replacements and those sort of home improvement projects. And I just absolutely loved it. And I just stuck with that as an industry. So in 2009, when I decided to open up my home improvement company, it was doing bathroom modeling and replacement windows, and it grew to be quite the business. In fact, it was 3 separate businesses, one out in Arizona called a Jacuzzi Bathroom Model. There was another business in Wisconsin called Tundraland, and then a couple of Renewal by Andersen window companies that I built. So the 3 companies combined were doing 150 million in revenue when I sold them.
Okay.
So, and by the way, I started the business in 2009 in the back of a friend's warehouse on a plastic folding table with $3,000 in cash.
Yeah.
So it was a real grind, but it was a good run.
So what does that transition, what does that growth look like? What were the steps you took that you thought really made that happen for you? Because look, that's sort of the American dream for a lot of people. That is starting with nothing, no angel investor or something like that, and just making it, bootstrapping it and making it on your own.
Yeah, look, the first rule of business is simply to stay in business, right? And if you're committed to staying in business, you do whatever it takes, and you just got to grind it out, and then you have to start adding to your team, right? And it's pretty interesting because, and I write about this in my book, that when it's just you as the entrepreneur and you're the only guy doing the stuff, the success of the business comes down to how well the entrepreneur performs. But then you start adding people and people and more people. And now the success of the business comes down to how well your teams perform. And that's, by the way, when the owner is looking and when they're not watching. So, how do you get teams to perform? And, coming out of the military, right? It's team performance is everything, right?
Sure.
And what makes a good team and what makes a bad team and what makes a good leader and what makes a bad leader. So I got lucky early on by bringing on some good talent, but then also being confident that I can continue to invest in the business through the cash flow of the business to grow. And look, we lost at times, but we didn't lose big enough that put us out of business, and we won more than we lost. And that was what was important.
Were there big things though that you look back on and say, these were the decision points, the inflection points that made it work?
There were a few of those. One specific situation was, we were a much smaller company. We probably had 30 employees at the time. We were probably doing $7 million a year. We weren't a very big company, but we were in a market with a lot of big competitors. And we were coming in Wisconsin, we were coming into home show season where every home improvement company is set up at a home show. If you've ever been to a home show,
I never have.
It says every company that sells home improvement projects is under one roof, and it's promoted as a home and garden show. And we were going to set up in this show, and I'm thinking to myself, we're going to be competing with all of these big companies. How do we win without competing with them? So I decided to put on our own home show, and it was 2 weeks before the big home show, and I spent a fortune marketing this home show as our very own home show, and I spent more money than I should have. If it didn't work, I probably wouldn't have been in business anymore, but it worked significantly well. And I took a lot of customers off the market before the big home show. And that's when I knew, what, I can be aggressive in this industry and I could really build a big business if I'm willing to invest in it.
What would I've had some other sort of entrepreneurial type people on the podcast, Todd Ehrlich from Killcliff and Bear Hanlon from Born Primitive. And these are the questions I asked them too. If you were to sort of give yourself advice starting off, right? What you know now, which would then apply to other entrepreneurial spirited people out there, what would that be?
Yeah, well, I think it's a few things. I think one thing is be careful not to be the bottleneck of the business. An entrepreneur wants to try to micromanage every aspect of the business because their entire checkbook, their entire life is invested in the business. But often what happens is the entrepreneur becomes the bottleneck and is the one that's really standing in the way of growth. The second thing is that, if you want to build a business, you have to commit to building people. And it's really about training and development. You're really a training organization if you're trying to scale a business. And if you're a training organization, then you have to realize that if it's not written down, then it doesn't exist inside of your business. It can't just live in your head. You've got to get it on paper. What does success look like? What do people need to know? How is their performance measured? How do you scale? And that's got to get written down so that people have something to go to as to know, what do I do in these situations? I think those things are really, really important. And then the third thing is the importance of, I think, serving the communities. And you coming out of the military, do you know about our program, Bass for the Brave?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one example. What that does for culture, and it just makes people really want to be part of an organization. And then you're no longer having to aggressively try to recruit people. People come to you because they want to work for you. And you get to be a little more selective on who gets to join your team.
Yeah. So let's stick on that. And by the way, I want to get to your book, obviously, and there's some stuff you brought up there from the book. So we'll get to that. But I want to stick on that point for a second, because this is one that I've asked them as well, because both those companies have sort of a give back program that they do in different ways. Yeah. The Born Primitive folks, they do different charities, but it's very much a sort of patriotic type mission. That's their thing. Killcliff, where I came from, actually. So my experience in sort of the business world is in CPG. And so those sort of conferences you're talking about are those big shows, right? I'm not used to what you're talking about, but I've been in like food shows basically, right? Like all of drinks and food and Expo East and Expo West and those things. So, but that company started off with a mission to be the largest contributor to our organization, the Navy SEAL Foundation. And that was a big driver, to your point, of sort of the ethos of the company and the way people felt about it. So how would you go about selecting that? Like especially, right? Because some companies, I would assume I don't want to say obvious, but it may be easier. It's like, depending on what you're doing, there may be a very easy sort of charity or, lane that you can be in. Others, maybe not so much. And so how do you think you go about figuring that out?
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, what are people passionate about, right? Not just the business owner, but how do you get the entire organization involved in whatever you're doing when you're doing good, right? I mean, there was a time early on in the business when we'd make a donation and we'd write a check, and I felt like the check was just going into some river and never saw the results of it. Yeah. And a lot of people in the organization didn't feel the impact. So we started looking for ways, where can we get people, how can we get it woven deep into the fabric of the business and get other people further down the organizational org chart to really contribute to things, so that so they could feel the same feeling I feel when I do good. And I wanted them to feel that too, as it's part of our mission statement. So look, it's different for everyone. And if you're a large company like we were, you can create your own programs. But if you're a smaller blue collar company, you have programs like Habitat for Humanity and such, that it's kind of a turnkey thing where you can step in and take on a small piece. But a lot of times it's just even serving Thanksgiving meals to people. I mean, I just think we have to get out of ourselves sometimes, and especially if we want to give the business heart and soul. I think that's important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I do think that that's I don't know that it's essential, but I think it can be a very, very important piece of any business, to have that purpose that's outside of just making money and growing the business and selling to a strategic or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly correct. And again, when you give people meaning, and you can really you can fundamentally change their lives. You can fundamentally take people that were lost in this world, and they now have meaning at work, and that meaning at work goes home with them. And I think it makes them better parents. I think it makes them better significant others. I think it makes them better members of the community, and it certainly makes them better teammates inside of your organization.
Yeah, for sure. On the X is proudly presented by Mechanics Wear. Known for their durability and comfort, Mechanics Wear gloves are made from top quality materials, offering protection against impacts, cuts, and abrasions. They feature advanced breathability and moisture wicking technology to keep hands cool and dry during any task. Designed with precision, these gloves provide a secure grip and flexibility, helping users work more efficiently and safely. They've certainly been my personal go-to glove for decades. Mechanics Wear gloves are available at most retailers, on mechanicswear.com, and on GSA Advantage. One kind of last thing before we get to the book, was there a point, because you kind of talked about this, or you sort of touched on it, was there a point in your journey with your business where you sort of realized, I'm a leader now, I'm not just kind of the guy doing this company? Because to your point, most entrepreneurs, you start off as like a company of one person, and then maybe you have a buddy who joins you or whatever. Yeah. But there's a point where it's not just we're all friends and doing this thing, where it's like, okay, I'm in charge now, and I'm actually responsible for these people.
Yeah. I legitimately had an epiphany. It's pretty interesting. I had a true epiphany. I remember the weekend, because we were sponsoring a music festival, and we set up our shower displays in this music festival. And instead of setting up towels and soaps in the displays, we put music instruments, microphones, and speakers in there, and we would ask people to come on by and sing in the shower. And once we got people singing in the shower, a certain amount of people, we'd send a kid to music school for a year. And it was, so I remember the weekend that we had just selected a kid, and my realization was that when the community's at a better place, we're in a better place. And the same is true for business. When the business is in a bad place, I'm in a bad place. But when the business is in a better place, we feel good at home. Our family does. And my realization was that the business can't reach its potential unless and until the people inside of the business first reach theirs. The lid of the business was directly connected to the lid of the people. And my epiphany was that my role is how do I help others realize their potential? What does that mean? What type of leader do I need to be to encourage and inspire others to realize their potential? And what is my responsibility in doing that as well? And it was a changing moment for me as a leader. It really gave me absolute clarity on what my mission was owning a company.
Yeah. And how big did your company get in terms of personnel?
When I sold the family of businesses, we were up to 600 employees.
Okay. That's a lot. That's big.
A lot.
That's a lot. Actually, one other thing too, can you talk real quick about hiring and what you think's important there? Because I think this is one of the most challenging things in business is hiring the right people. And I think it's something too, when I talked to Simon Sinek about this, it was like the thing that people should spend way more time on to get the right people. I mean, I learned this lesson a bunch, again, running that sales team where it's like hire fast, fire fast. And there's some people that subscribe to that idea of like, yeah, just hire fast. And I think, no, I mean, one, I hate firing people. It's like, it's worse than sales for me, is like having to have that conversation with somebody. But I just think it's, after that experience, I think you're better off spending 3 times as long getting the right people in the door, and hopefully never having to let them go.
Yeah, I think it's more of a, I don't think it's a clock. I think it's a philosophy. I don't think it's hire fast or hire slow. I think it's hire smart. It's know what the role is you're trying to hire for and what filters are you using in order to interview. So we had a saying around our business called hiring to ether, and ether stood for ethical, trainable, hungry, energetic, and reliable. And one example that I write about in the book is like our sales model was scripted. And in a scripted sales environment, if somebody comes into an organization that doesn't like scripting and they're applying for a sales role and they're not willing to memorize a script, it's not going to work out well, whether I hired fast or hired slow. So what we would do is we would send them a 2-sentence script before the interview and have them come in on the interview with the goal to recite the script.
Right.
We didn't care if they butchered the script, mind you, but if they didn't even try, they weren't even considered for the role. But if they did try, I knew that's one piece that's super important in that role. So it's a box that gets checked.
I remember that from the book. And I just, when I read that, I thought, who wouldn't memorize two sentences?
You would be surprised.
I mean, because you're telling them memorize this, right? That's like, hey, part of your interview is we want you to memorize these 2 sentences, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't really very complicated. It was, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. My name is Brian. I'm here for our afternoon design appointment. Is there a place near the kitchen table that we can set up for today's meeting? Yeah. It wasn't really even that big of a sentence, but yeah.
And there's people that didn't even do that. It's crazy to me.
But but how many people show up in a training environment where they're just kind of taking a seat?
Yeah,
and we need active participation from people. People are really hungry to grow, and so hungry is a really important aspect of what to hire for, I think, in a growing business.
For sure. So let's talk about your book. So Beyond the Hammer, what made you want to write this?
After I sold my businesses, it was the next challenge. And I got to tell you, it was a challenge. Writing a book is, I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was. And especially because of the way I wrote it, as you know, the first half is a parable. It's a business parable about somebody that's struggling. Just writing a parable and coming up with characters and character arcs was challenging, but I wanted something. Look, entrepreneurs are very busy, right? And I needed to create something that had easy entrance and exit points so people can pop in and pop out of it. So I thought a parable would be important. And then the second half of the book is more strategy. So it was a 2-year process, and I was the next challenge I needed to accomplish. And it was pretty exciting. I really enjoyed it, every aspect of it. It was a fun ride.
It's funny. I was trying to remember if there was another book that I had ever read that had this kind of structure where the first half is a parable. It's a story. It's a fictional story about a company and their struggles and kind of this sort of guru character, right? Who knows how to help them figure out leadership and management and inspiration and all of this kind of stuff. The only one that I could come up with that I think is like this, and it's been a long time since I've read it, is 5 dysfunctions of a team, I think is written that way, right?
I've heard that analogy a lot. I've heard a lot
Okay.
of people refer to it, that it's very much like 5 dysfunctions of a
It
team.
is.
And
Yes.
yeah,
Have you
it's
not, have
great.
you not read that book?
I have, and I'm
okay.
thrilled to be associated with
Yeah.
that book. It's a fantastic book, and he's a fantastic writer. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah. I mean, I read that again when I was at Killcliff. We did kind of like, I think I'd be curious to know, actually, our company's now doing this with your book, where it was like, everybody read this book, and then we're going to do a little offsite and we're going to talk about it and how are we, you know, aligned with this. Is that something people are doing with your book at this point?
Yeah, it's been an incredible, it's been a humbling process. Okay, when you put something out there, right, you never know how it's going to be received. But what I'm seeing is people aren't just they're buying one book or they're buying the audiobook, and the audiobook's fantastic. I have to tell you a story on the audiobook in a minute.
I listened to, I was telling the last guest this, I now do this thing where I listen to books and read them at the same time.
Yeah.
So I get, because I have to read a lot of books for this podcast, and I get through them faster if I'm sort of listening to a chapter, like while I'm driving or whatever, and then I read a chapter, and then so I get to, plus it's nice to, like, you read part of this, you read the second half of the book.
Correct.
And it's nice to hear the author too.
Yeah, and Eduardo Ballerini, who read the first half, isn't he terrific? He's unbelievable. He's so talented. He's anyway, so what I'm seeing is people are not just buying one book; they're reading one, and then they're buying a whole bunch of books for their team. They're doing book clubs. I just did a keynote yesterday for a home improvement group, and they bought 325 books. So the traction this book has gotten has been a very, very humbling experience, and reviews and all that. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. How about that?
By the way, why did you do that? Why did you have someone else read the first part and then you read the second part?
Yeah, I was really intimidated trying to read a parable with different characters and voices and different and trying to keep that straight. I didn't think I would nearly do it justice. So Eduardo Ballerini, who used to actually be an actor on The Sopranos, and does audiobooks for like James Patterson, and he's a professional audiobook reader, and he just killed it. So when I reached out to him to do the book, I honestly didn't even think he'd get back to me. But when he agreed to do the book, I was thrilled. So I had him do the first half.
So how did you come up with that parable? Because like that part is really interesting to me. I can totally understand. I mean, there's lots of leadership books out there, business books, where it's like, here's my experience and here's kind of the principles that I espouse as a result. But to your point, if I had to write a fictional story, even if it was sort of tied into those principles, I don't even know where I would start. So how did you do that? Are they based on real people?
They are. They're based on the George, the struggling contractor, is based on I know I've met a lot of Georges over my life, and I've been a George at times as well. And then Marty is modeled after sort of the lessons of the leadership books. That was easy to come from my perspective. But yeah, it was really fun bringing on new characters and trying to figure out. And it was so interesting because sometimes I had to challenge myself. It's like, okay, is this character in here for a reason? Because the whole point of the parable is to teach a lesson. It's not this isn't a novel, so it's to teach a lesson. So I wanted to make sure I kept it really crisp and clean, and again, very engaging, so that people wouldn't get bored with it.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the stuff that's in it. So to start, you have this kind of thing about a lot of businesses or a lot of leaders are sort of command and control approached, and you talk about transparency, empathy, and vision. So dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you have a couple of choices on how you want to lead a business, right? Do you want a command control model where you are the bottleneck, like we were talking about earlier? How do you not become the bottleneck? Command control naturally creates a bottleneck model, or the business is built out of so many policies that the people inside of the business aren't empowered to think on their own. In that environment, mistakes are punished. You did something wrong, you're getting punished. And I think the challenge with that is especially in the service industry, when the thing about the home improvement business or the service industry in general is 99% of the entire team is interacting with customers all the time. They're on the telephone, face to face. And I think it's difficult to have a policy for every single interaction. So you've got to teach people how to think. You've got to teach them how to make decisions. And it's not about punishing mistakes. It's about really frowning upon indecision. That's what you don't want in an empowered environment. We have to teach people how to make decisions. So look, I think, and plus, in all fairness, I'm just not a command control kind of guy. So I think, I have to model a business on what suits me as a leader as well. So I don't want to be barking orders all day. That would be like a drain. I want to inspire and encourage people to realize their potential.
What do you mean by that, though? When you say command and control, because look, command and control is come from the military, right? Command and control is a really important thing. Like, somebody's in charge. They're in command of the organization, the unit or whatever, the team, and they certainly control it. So what's bad about that, I guess? Yeah.
Although in the military, that they also listen to those closest that are on the ground. Everybody has a voice, right?
Yes.
So in business, when we think about command control, often what happens is there's the voice that's close to the customer is simply not permitted. In organizations where it's the boss's way and this is the way we're doing it, it's the only way we're going to do it. And what happens is in business, as businesses grow and layers and layers are added to an org chart, the CEO gets further and further and further away from the customer and can sometimes make decisions in their ivory tower that is not necessarily good for the business. People that are closest to the customer often have the best solutions and the best ways to innovate the business. And we have to invite those kinds of conversations. In an organizational command control, that doesn't happen very frequently. So that's, I think, the main difference.
Yeah. I mean, I always found that the most important thing was letting people have a voice inside the company and them knowing that their voice was heard. The decision might not be what they want, but as long as it's like, hey, I was able to give my opinion on this and that was heard, that was kind of enough. It would be enough for me. Certainly. It's like, hey, whoever my boss was, if I'm able to be honest about what I think we should do and they listen to me, they can make a different decision. That's okay. That's their prerogative. But it's when, to your point, I'm not even listened to, right? Or it's not even encouraged to have that kind of upward leadership, so to speak.
Yeah. Ultimately, what do people really care about? I mean, sure, they care about their paycheck, but people in general, whether it's your spouse or anybody or your children, people want to feel valued and appreciated. It doesn't mean you have to implement every one of their ideas, but if they have a voice at the table and they can give their opinion and they're at least listened to, that's a big deal. It's because it does, by the way, affects how people think about the business itself. It affects their mindset of the business, and how people think, how we think, affects how we feel and how we behave, and it affects our engagement and and how present we are in the company and how much we care about showing up at work. Mindset matters, and listening to people really affects mindset.
Yeah, for sure. So I asked this. I've had also a bunch of people talking about leadership on the podcast, and I asked this question to all of them. So I talked to Simon Sinek, Jocko, Jason Jaggard recently, and asking basically, what are the most important leadership qualities, right? If you're ideal qualities that a leader has. And Simon's were integrity and courage. Jocko, it was humility. And not that they disagreed with one another, but he was kind of harped on that. Jason's was nobility, which I actually thought was a great word for that. I agree with all of those, but I'm curious on your take on that.
Yeah, well, I think authenticity is a really important leadership quality, because leaders come in all shapes and sizes, but authenticity wins. People want to know that they're dealing with the real person. I also think that, and it's in the book, that the leaders have to be aware of the echo of their voice, because what happens is people inside of the business are going to decide what kind of day they have based on the kind of the day that the leader is having. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, I don't think leaders get to have bad days. I don't think they get to wear their stress on their sleeve, because the rest of the team is going to be stressful also. So I think when our EQ is high and we're in tune to our actions, that's an important trait for leadership. If I'm on this podcast with you, all of a sudden I pick up my phone and I say, hold on a second, I got a text, I got to respond to this. You'd be like, Brian, what the frick are you doing here, man? We're kind of having a conversation. And yet we do that in meetings with people all the time.
Yeah.
I think staying present, being present is a really important aspect of leadership, that whether it's a one-on-one conversation or a group setting, being present for people is hugely important.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's kind of what's nice about podcasting, actually, is like I guess you could be a dick like that and just pick up your phone and start texting or whatever. But for the most part, like, you're forced to be present. It's actually, you know what? I never thought about it in this regard, but it's one thing that's really nice about this format is, like, there's just no way to have, without being unprofessional, a distraction here. It is a conversation where there's nothing else going on. No one is texting you. No one's pinging you. No one else is in the room that's trying to grab your attention or anything. Yeah.
And you and I could be having this exact same conversation sitting in your office, right across the table from each other. And there's a chance that one of us might pick up our phone and have to shoot a message to somebody. And yet there's certain environments that we wouldn't consider doing it. If we're on stage speaking at a conference, we're not going to pick up our phone and answer a text. Right. But if we applied that to all areas when dealing with people, how much different would not only just our lives be, but the people that we interact with be? I think of it. It's actually a principle that we had, that if you imagine that every person you meet has a sticker on their forehead that reads, "Help me feel special." And if we can interact with everybody and help them feel special in that moment, that is, as much as all those other ideas of leadership, that too is leadership.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to have to think about that, like try that with people. Like, that's sort of like the imagine people in their underwear thing to make you feel more comfortable when you're giving a talk. Imagine them with a sticker on their forehead that says "Make me feel special."
Well, it's interesting. Like, if you go to a Subway, right? You go and get a sandwich at a Subway, and they make your sandwich. You can say thank you and walk out the door, or you can just take an extra second and say thank you. You know what? You're clearly an artist in making sandwiches, and I just want to let you know you made my day. I'm truly going to enjoy this. Thank you. Yeah. And that little extra conversation is like, oh my gosh, you're welcome. That's so cool. It just these little moments of helping people feel special.
That's a good idea. I like this. I'm going to try that. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We hear a lot about relationship red flags, but what about green flags? Therapy can help you identify and practice the traits of healthy, supportive relationships, whether with a partner, a friend, or yourself. And if you're looking for a licensed therapist, BetterHelp can connect you with any of over 30,000 of them online. It's convenient, affordable, and easy to switch therapists if needed, serving over 5 million people worldwide. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/onthex to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/onthex. Okay, so you have 5 pillars in your book, which actually is really easy because we have 5 pillars of support at the foundation. So I'm very familiar with the 5-pillar concept. So let's go through these and just kind of talk about them. First, and you mentioned one there, but that we'll get back to. But belief is transferable is the first one.
Yeah. And it ties back into the epiphany that I had, right? If my role is to help people realize their potential, what we also have to recognize is that people don't know what their potential is. We tend to have something known as FUD, which stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that FUD holds us back from really, really pushing ourselves and stretching ourselves. And sometimes it just takes somebody else to believe in them, So, by the way, belief is transferable, both positive and negative. And we tend to hold on to negative criticism more than we do positive words of encouragement. But I think a leader's role in a business is to expand people's potential. In order to do so, we have to let them know that we believe in them. And that's why it's one of the pillars of the book.
Yeah. Okay. Leaders shape culture through purpose and direction.
Yeah. I use the analogy in the book about my Harley Davidson, right? And that I like to hop on my Harley and go for a ride down some country road by myself, no destination in mind, and then turn around and maybe go halfway down, pull over and smoke a cigar and go back on my ride again. And that's fine when it's just me, but if I had like 10 motorcycles following me, I would drive them crazy. It's like, where are we going, Brian? Why are we turning around? I don't even smoke cigars. Why are we stopping now? And in business, it's the same thing. If we hire a bunch of people, but we don't tell them the purpose of the trip or the destination where we're going, that they're going to question the journey itself. And leaders shape culture through purpose and direction. Purpose being mission, and direction being a vision statement. And culture is that thing that it's if you think about it as the way people think about the organization and the way they behave inside of the business. And purpose and direction really help shape culture. The other thing, by the way, is culture is significantly shaped by the lowest level of acceptable behavior. When we have people in the business that we know we need to be dealing with, but we're not dealing with them because maybe they're a high revenue producer, so we're not bothering them right now. All of these things affect our culture in a negative way. So we get to we use our mission and a vision in a way to help sculpt the culture of the business.
Yeah.
And culture is important.
And you talk about in the books, the vision and mission statements, like specifically like getting these things down explicitly.
Correct.
It's one of the things in the parable that they're working on. It's like, hey, we come up with this mission statement, right? And that's where the whole Beyond the Hammer comes from. So
that's right.
So talk about the process there that you see. Well, first of all, what's different about those things, vision versus mission? And then the best process you think there is to sort of come up with those statements.
Yeah, if you think about a mission statement, you think about, why does your organization exist? What is the purpose that this business exists for? And I was doing it's interesting. I was doing a mock presentation for a window company that we created, this model that was designed to serve veterans, right? Where free projects would be done for veterans. And its mission statement was serving homes and serving veterans. So, the mission statement it tells why the organization exists. Our mission statement was to do well and do good. And we define that like the purpose of business is to make a decent profit, but to do so decently. And what does that mean, right? How does a business make a decent profit decently? So a mission statement is timeless. It's why the business exists. A vision statement is for team alignment. It's if you have an organization and you're watching this right now or listening to this, what do you aspire the business to become? Think 3, 4, 5 years from now. What do you aspire? What do you hope the business one day will become? And then secondly, how do you win? What behaviors do you need from the people inside of the business in order to reach your aspirational goals? And as I write about, sometimes it's easy to figure out how we lose. And if we make a list of the ways in which we lose as a business, the opposite is typically how we win. But when you have a well thought out mission and vision statement, people then know what's required of them. They know why they're doing certain things. They know what they're chasing. And when people know what they're chasing, everything comes out a whole lot better. You think about the playoffs that are going on, the NFL playoffs. If everybody's chasing the Super Bowl, it's pretty clear, right? Everybody knows what the aspirational goal is. Do the people in your business know what its aspirational goal is? And if you can get them to know that, how much different of a business do you have?
Is that do you put a target in terms of timing on that? Like 5 years from now, we want to be here. 10 years from now, we want to be here, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I personally believe that a vision statement should address somewhere between 3 and 5 years from now. So it's a stretch goal, it's aspirational, but it's not so far out that you never achieve it. So that gives you a chance to revisit it after in say another 3 or 4 years, and not to do it alone again in your silo, in your office, right? But to unite the team and say, okay, what's next for us? What do we really want to do here?
And to that point, what's the best way to do this? If you're in an organization that doesn't have a mission statement, I think a lot probably have mission statements. I think they have goals. I don't know if they sort of turn that into a vision statement, so to speak, but what's the best process for that?
Yeah, I just helped an organization come up with their vision statement. They had a mission statement in place, and look, we started out by just talking about, looking at the industry, why are we doing these things? What do we really want to accomplish as an organization? What's the impact that we want to make? I was trying to come up with what their aspirational goals were. And then we made a big list. I just talked about, okay, tell me when you guys screw up. When do give me hard examples of why, when you screw up. Maybe it's, we're not communicating well with our customers, or we're not communicating well with each other, or there's negativity in the room, or we came up with a long list, and then we just spun it around and said, okay, so part of our vision statement is we win by being great communicators with our clients, keeping a positive attitude, and always making sure that we're communicating internally well. So we were able to format a really meaningful vision statement that they were then able to use with their team. And when they're having like one-on-ones with teammates, when the CEO is having a one-on-one with somebody, or a manager is having a one-on-one with somebody, now it's no longer about the performance. We can talk about your numbers and your performance, but we can also talk about how are your individual behaviors aligning to the vision of the team.
And were you
it just widens the whole conversation.
And is that just with the leaders, so to speak, or the managers in the company? I mean, how far down the organization would you go with something like that?
I have no problem going deep into the organization, but I don't find it effective if you have like 30 people in the room trying to help you with a vision statement.
Yeah.
So, but I think you need representation from different areas of the business. I think that's quite helpful, especially when you want to roll it out.
Yeah. Okay. So next one, leaders. I think this is the one you mentioned before. Leaders are aware of the echo of their voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Staying present, knowing that the high producer, low culture fit that doesn't get addressed is affecting your culture, and it sends an echo. And, what echo do we want to send as a leader? That's right.
Leaders model their business as a training organization. You mentioned this earlier as well.
Yeah. When I first started my business, if you would have asked me in 2009 what it was, I would have said we were a construction company. If you'd have asked me probably in about 2014, I would have said, well, we're a sales and marketing company that happens to be in home improvements. But what really allowed us to grow was to say we're a training organization, and to model our business that way, and realize that, again, as I said earlier, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. And how do we become how do we know if we're being effective at developing people? One of our best recruiting sources, by the way, was we would talk to guidance counselors in high schools, because the guidance counselors knew the kids that weren't going to go to college, and we could present them with a wonderful training program, an amazing career path in the trades. But to deliver on that, we better be excellent at developing people. So to me, I think any organization that's trying to add folks and scale, you really got to think like a training organization. And there's definitely some examples in the book to look to.
Okay. And then the last one, managers need a checklist.
Yeah. I've found that in most companies, when there's a manager that quits or a manager that leaves an organization, there's this scramble that goes on to try to replace that role. And companies typically look to the person with the most experience to fill that role,
right,
regardless of that person's ability to communicate with people. And we might train certain roles in the business fanatically, right? Fanatically, frontline people fanatically. But often organizations lack a good training model for the managers. And when we think about the manager is essentially the custodian of the company's culture, because they're doing, the hiring, the firing, the promoting, the rewarding, all those sorts of things, all of that affects the mindset of the team. Managers need to know what do good managers do, and that's why they need a checklist. And in the book, I've listed the 10 practices of high-performing managers, and also, as you know, a step-by-step breakdown on how to truly plug it into your business.
Yeah. Can you talk about the difference between, this is something where I want to dive in a little bit, because I found myself going, I don't know if I agree with that 100%. The difference between a leader and a manager in your estimation.
Yeah. To be fair, I've spoken at conferences around the country on this topic, and usually I ask questions like, what's the difference between a manager and a leader? And I hear all kinds of stuff, and managers tell you what to do, leaders show you what to do. And look, it's in reality, it's not two different people. In reality, it's one person that often has to carry on two different tasks. Sometimes we have to drive change, which is a leadership talent. And sometimes we have to navigate the day-to-day complexities inside of the business, and that's about management. And we don't get to choose that, well, I'm just a manager. Sometimes sometimes we're having a coaching session with an individual, and we have to coach them up to believe they can accomplish more. That's not management. That's a leadership skill. So argument I make in the book is that it's not two different people. It's one person wearing two different hats. And management is about levers of control, and leadership is about levers of influence.
Yeah. I was thinking about this, and I think the difference for me is I totally agree with you. I think it's not like there's managers and there's leaders. I think anybody that's a manager has to lead at some point, and anybody who's a leader, I think almost by default is a manager. I mean, you sort of, that goes with the thing. To me, it seems to be the difference between sort of management is getting people to do whatever the tasks that need to be done for the sake of the company, right? For the company goals. Leadership is making them feel good about it, like making them want to do it. It's more about the emotional aspect of it. Like it's inspiring them and stuff. Right. So one's management's like pragmatic and leadership is emotional, I think,
Yeah. Maybe if we take that a step further, maybe management is the what and leadership is the why.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Same way, same kind of concept there. I'd never really considered that, but I think when I break it down, that's the way I think about it.
That's great.
What do you, when you're talking to these companies, do you ever like come across a company that's just like, like totally jacked up, just toxic? And what do you do with a company like that? Where do you start?
When you have a really toxic company, right, you can usually look behind the door of the CEO and see what the cause of that is, right?
I agree. Yep.
And it just kind of reverbs through the entire business, right? And some CEOs, they usually have some business that's very broken, and unfortunately, it's hard for them to reflect and realize that they're the problem. Right. It's, I think it was Jocko that said there are no bad teams, just bad leaders. Right.
Yeah. So what do you do with those? I mean, do you ever work with companies like that are in that, in that situation, and you have to kind of tell the boss like, hey, it's you, it's not me, it's you.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. You have to have those conversations, and they're not easy ones to have, but they're crucial conversations just the same, right?
Yeah.
And often, sometimes they're met with resistance, and other times they're met with, it's a humbling experience even for the CEO to realize that, yeah, I caused this and I'm the problem.
Yeah.
But once they have that breakthrough, though, if they can have that breakthrough, it can fundamentally change a business too.
Are there any business or leadership practices where your attitude on them has changed or like completely flipped over the years and all your experience, where you went into it thinking it's this way and came to realize, no, it's not that way, it's some other way?
Yeah. One example is when in the book, there's a 4 square about performance and culture fit, right?
Yep.
So you take that 4 square, and we know the low performer, low culture fit, that's an easy one. You terminate them, right? And we know you promote the high performer, high culture fit, but what do you do with the other 2 boxes, right? What do you do with that high performer, low culture fit, the person that generates revenue? And I used to think the right thing to do is to isolate them. Okay, they're high performers, low culture fits. You put them out on an island, you capture the revenue that they're generating, and so be it. But what I learned was that's wrong. I learned that I need a team that's aligned. I need a team that's together. I need a team that's truly a team. And I can't achieve that when a portion of the people are isolated. I used to think that was the right thing, but I changed my mind on it. It's tough. It's tough to make change when you have a high performer, low culture fit. Sure, you hope to coach up culture. And by the way you coach up culture is through conversations on alignment to the team vision statement. It's like, hey, you're hitting your KPIs, you're exceeding all your sales numbers, but we have to talk about behavior fit as well. And that's why that vision statement inside of an organization is so important.
Yeah. What was the other question I was going to ask you? I wanted to ask you about going back to the kind of the hiring thing. What's your take on, you mentioned this before about experience, your take on sort of experience versus character for hiring? Because I'm big on this, where I think that too often we rely on experience, and you see that in like job descriptions, right? And whatever it may be, job postings where it's like experience. And certainly there's a certain level of experience depending on the job that may be required. I get that. You can't hire a CFO who has no idea how to run accounting, right?
Correct.
I get that. However, I just think that, and this is in my conversation with Simon Sinek, was like, it's not that there's no experience and character's all that matters. It's that the order matters. Like, you hire for character first and then hire for experience was kind of his thing, which I completely agree with, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. And then how you do that, which this is always the challenging thing, I think.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you an interesting story. The story behind the reason I started my business, right? So we've got 6 kids, right? My wife and I have 6 kids.
Okay.
And yeah, we got a whole slew of children. Anyway, before I started my business, I was consulting in the home improvement industry, and I wanted to come off the road. There were a couple of I wanted to just get off the road. I was done traveling, done living in hotels, done missing baseball games with my kids, and I applied at a few companies. And because I didn't have any college education, they passed on me. I couldn't get the job. And so that's one of the reasons why I decided to start my own business. Thank goodness I didn't have a college education, because I wouldn't have had the exit that I had. So experience and education, how important is all that stuff? Look, I think the challenge with, you're right, a CFO, I need a CFO that knows what they're doing. But in many roles, if they have too much experience, I almost have to untrain them in order to train them our way. And that gets really, really complicated. I just want to know that people are, it goes back to being hungry, and trainable and ethical and energetic and reliable. It goes back to ether. And those are the individuals I want to get on my team. I want to get people that I don't care if they've never done it before, unless if it's a certain role. I just want people that are eager for more and are willing to go all in on a mission, and really they just want to excel, because those are the people that, boy, you can have a long runway with.
Yeah. Just kind of going back to the beginning a little bit. What do you think it is about? I find that there are a lot of people that are the sort of the most entrepreneurial, in my estimation. And this is people I know personally, and then stories like Steve Jobs, where they are sort of people that buck the system. They don't go to college. They like don't fit into this, are sort of educate yourself to the highest extent possible and then go into the workforce and train, educate. They just don't fit that mold. And why is that? Is it just the out of the box thinking?
Sadly, I think the education system is not set up for entrepreneurs. Maybe at the college level, right? But certainly not at least not in the days that I went to school. That there wasn't this. You're very much in a box. You have to read this. You have to take this test. You have to know math. But what about communicating with people? What about being entrepreneurial? What about all those sort of things? In many ways, the education system, not to go down a wild rabbit hole here,
that's okay,
is kind of set up in the age of manufacturing, where they group people based on their birth date, right? The date of manufacturing, and nothing else, right? You were born in 1960. You're all going to the same class for the next 12 years, and I think that's one of the challenges. So if you don't fit, you simply don't fit.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
And then what's your day-to-day look like these days? Are you running a business at this point, or is it kind of like you sort of do consulting with folks and talk about the book? And
I sit on several boards for companies, and I'm invested in a variety of companies. I don't run any businesses day to day. I have another organization where we help companies sell businesses that are looking to exit.
Yep.
And I'm working on my next book. So
there you go.
Which is all. And I speak at conferences all the time, and I do keynotes. I have a good time.
Yeah. Just last kind of thing here. Just talk a little more about Baths for the Brave and what that is exactly for people that aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, Baths for the Brave is a program. And when we talked earlier about how do we drive our mission into the business, right, of doing well and doing good, the bath remodeling business is an amazing business, but it's also very sad, because we would go into a lot of homes where we would see these veterans that served our country proudly, but now, because of mobility issues and financial challenges, they have a bathtub that's simply dangerous to step over, and they can't even take a shower safely in their own home. And we just thought that was simply unacceptable. And what can we do about that? So I formed a program called Bass for the Brave, where we surprise veterans with free shower systems, where we go into their home, we crash their shower, and they have a new the first time we did it, actually, there was this fella named Mike Alstein. He was an Iraqi war veteran that did 2 tours in Iraq, came home and was diagnosed with MS, and like that, bam, he was in a wheelchair. And we heard about his story, so we worked with his friends and his mom to get him out of the house for the day and go to a hockey game at night. And while he was at the hockey game, we met him that evening and wheeled him out on the ice to thank him for his service. But we showed on the Jumbotron that when he left his home in the morning, our guys snuck in his house and totally crashed his bathroom and made it handicap accessible. And that just put us on a mission to do more and more of that. Today, Bass for the Brave it's a bunch of like-minded home improvement companies across the country that on Veterans Day surprise veterans with free bath projects. We don't raise any money for this at all, and we've done several $1 million in free bath projects for veterans across the country so that they can be safe in their own home and feel good about caring for themselves.
So you don't, this isn't like a nonprofit where people donate to it at all?
Not at all. We don't raise any money. This all comes out of our own pockets.
That is awesome. That's great. What got you interested in, I mean, it's fantastic. What got you interested in that? Do you have military in your family, or is it?
Yeah, in my family, but also, look, I think, I didn't serve, but how can I serve today?
Yeah. Right.
And how can I serve those that have served us? And it's just one way to do it. And I think it's something, again, that it's not just about me. It's about the different people in the business would volunteer to want to be part of Bass for the Brave and donate their time. They want to be on that bath crash. They want to bring cupcakes to the day of the crash. They want to coordinate with the fire department to come out and change smoke detector batteries the day of the crash. The veteran was truly honored by people in their community each time we did this. And again, it wasn't just my company. It was like-minded companies across the country that still participate in this.
That's awesome.
There's a cool website with stories on it. It's bassforthebrave.com. It's pretty cool.
That's really cool. Well, let's end it there because that's really uplifting. So, thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate you coming on. It was great talking to you, and enjoyed the book. And thanks so much, man.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you, my friend.
All right, take care. Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series sponsored by Mechanicswear. Learn more at NavySEALFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104 to join our subscriber list. See you next time. Hey everybody, Chris Irwin here, Communications Director for the Navy SEAL Foundation and the On the X podcast host. So Ironclad is our video production company. They are our podcast production company, and they've been with us since before I was even at the foundation, so more than 6 years. They're pretty much in some way plugged in with just about everything we do at the foundation, certainly on the communications side of things, and I honestly don't know what I would do without them. So they are absolutely top shelf in every regard in what they do. They're able to capture things that really look authentic, especially when it comes to some of the operator footage that can be challenging to do. And everything else is just done at such a high level that I don't really have to think about it or worry about it. If you or your organization or your company are looking for video production, if you're looking for post-production, podcast hosting, these guys can do it all. Check them out, ironcladagency.com, highly recommended.